Okay, next let's talk about the near abroad countries. And we're going to include the Eastern European countries that were in the previous chapter, but we're going to include them now. Now, the near abroad are the parts of the former Soviet Union that are now independent, including Central Asian countries, 3 in Transcaucasia, and the Eastern European countries, including the Baltic states. So let's start with the Eastern European countries first. We can kind of put these into 2 buckets. We have 3 that go full European and 3 that are still somewhat aligned with Russia. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania joined the European Union, joined NATO, more complicated than these other 3. All right, so here in the Baltic, you have countries that joined the European Union and NATO. It's Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. One thing that really that complicates things as well is over here near the Baltic, you also have the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. So this here, it says Rus, this is technically part of Russia. So remember that at one time the Soviet Union extended all the way through this parts. These became independent, but Russia retained this external part of its territory. It's a major military base, and it's really important militarily. And this is a somewhat of a region of potential conflict in the future, because remember that NATO originally was kind of the military force that was kind of pushing back against the former Soviet Union. So you have Russia, which is sort of the leftover part of the Soviet Union, and as traditional enemies of NATO up here, kind of, and then you have the Kaliningrad exclave, calling it enclave here, but it's an exclave, kind of blocked off between there. And we'll include some videos that kind of talk a little bit more in depth about Kaliningrad and the situation. It's considered to be having the potential for a new Cold War. Now the other 3, Moldova, Belarus, and Ukraine, are really kind of split between Russia and Europe. Many of them have significant Russian minorities because of policies of Russification. So if we look at this figure from the previous chapter, we can see that significant Russian minorities in Belarus, Ukraine, and also Moldova. And I'm going to focus just on Ukraine as an example. Ukraine is a country that is very much split between influence from Russia and influence from Europe. High amount of devolutionary forces in the country, because if you look in the east near Russia, there's much more Russian minorities, strong pro-Russian support. Or if you go to the west, a lot more pro-European support. This is showing the native language of people, and here in the east, including the Crimean Peninsula, much higher percentage of Russian-speaking people rather than Ukrainian language. And they tend to vote as a bloc as well. This tends to be where people vote for more pro-European candidates. This is where people vote for more pro-Russian candidates. And in 2014, this really came to a head where you had the people rose up and overthrew an elected Russian-backed president. And then at the same time, this Crimean Peninsula down here was taken back by military force. It was taken from Ukraine by Russia. And I'll include some videos that kind of talk about this a little more, but let me go back a little bit and show you something. If you look here in the book, the figures, this is the Crimean Peninsula. This had been until recently, until 2014, part of Ukraine, but Russia really kind of seized it back. So that may be a good example of revanchism, part of kind of taking back territory that had been part of the former Soviet Union. So it's the Central Asian countries. Take a closer look. It includes Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and so on. And so these are called the stands. And note that they all end in that stand word. So if you had say a test question, you had to identify which was or was not a Central Asian country. Central Asian countries all end in Stan. That's one way to easily identify them. The reason for that is that it's part of the Persian language, part of the Persian Empire, and Stan means like land. So we have words like Ireland, Finland. Stan is kind of a similar construct like that. It means land of the Kazakhs, land of the Uzbeks. And because Persian is also Indo-European language, its constructs are similar to what we have in Europe, where we have Finland, Ireland, and so on. Now, one thing about the Central Asian countries is that many of them have oil and gas resources, and they're becoming, where these were some very backward countries at one time. They were little known, little connected with the rest of the world. They were kind of like the backwater of the Soviet Union, but now they're becoming increasingly integrated with the global economy because of oil and gas, but also because of something called the New Silk Road, that there is a project by China to develop new transportation corridors through Central Asia to connect East Asia with European countries. So the original Silk Road was kind of a slow process where, you know, caravans would go from Europe to East Asia, China in particular. The new Silk Road is a new rail link that goes from the interior of China all the way now, this is a little out of date, all the way to London, England, and to other places. It's part of what's called China's Belt and Road Initiative, where they're trying to increase their influence and trade with other parts of the world. However, relevant here is that much of this goes through Central Asia, and I'll include a film on that as well. This is something called the Kyrgyz Gateway, because Russian trains had a different size of track than Chinese trains. This is the world's largest, it's not circle. There, Kyrgyz. This is at the edge of China and Kazakhstan, where you have the largest inland port in the world, where freight shipping containers are unloaded from one type of train to the other and continue on their way. One thing notable about the Central Asian country is that culturally, in some ways, they have a lot in common with the Middle East and North Africa. We haven't talked about religion, geography as much, but Islam is a dominant religion in Central Asia, as well as in parts of the Caucasus as well. So these are majority Islamic countries, that the religion here is different than the variants of Christianity that you would typically find in Russia. There are also linguistic differences, that a lot of the native languages are Turkic, which are related to people who have kind of migrated throughout Siberia all the way to Turkey. Turkey, Turkmenistan, these are names that are kind of associated with that Turkic language. We talked about the Indo-European family of languages. Turkic is a separate family of languages. Here's an image. Now, just to kind of look in the background, much of Central Asia is mountainous and dry. You can kind of see that in the background here. There's a lot of new wealth. This is the capital of Kazakhstan. You can see a lot of kind of flashy new stuff, a lot of new buildings going up. And so this is becoming increasingly interconnected with the global economy. Let's jump over to Transcaucasia now. And Transcaucasia includes Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And one thing about this is a map showing the different ethnic groups. It is a rugged mountainous environment with extremely complex ethnic groups and religious differences. A multitude of languages, multitude of ethnic groups, and also mix of different religions of both Islam and Christianity. So for example, this is showing religion here. You have You have one type of Christianity dominant in Armenia, a different type in Georgia, and a type of Islam that is more kind of Shiite Islam in Azerbaijan. So, you know, ethnic differences, religious difference, very complicated. A couple of things that you have are exclaves. We talked about the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. Armenia has an exclave that's in Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan has an exclave that's in Armenia. So these have been a source of conflict between the two groups. These are mountainous and remote areas where you have different pockets of ethnic groups living in different places. This is the country Georgia. In Georgia, this is where you have examples of devolution and revanchism. So you have pro-Russia parts of Georgia that want to be part of Russia that have rebelled and try to gain their own independence. In fact, Georgia even went to war with Russia in 2008 as Russia tried to kind of take back some of its territory. So in fact, this is Abkhazia as an example. This is one of the Capitol buildings. It got shot up during this conflict. They leave it this is a picture of it all shot up, and they leave it kind of shot up as a memorial to that time. So you have some parts of Georgia that kind of claim that, you know, South Ossetia that wants to be part of, you know, Russia, Abkhazia that wants to become independent, become more pro-Russia. So it's an area of devolutionary forces similar to what we saw in Europe.